Welcome to the magical world of Wysteria. This magical world was once so full of life, not a barren wasteland ravaged by the grips of time itself. In order to tell this story properly, we must tell it from the very beginning. There once was a king named Andreas of Wallachia that was extremely wealthy but didn't know how to become a mighty king, keeping his wealth all to himself. This land was often barren, with no receptive of wildlife or crops. Villagers came and went throughout Wallachia, leaving the population in dire straits. Most of the roads leading to the capital of Wallachia, Aragon, are unkempt and muddy, with only people who've fallen upon hard times near the roads to the capital. Aragon was the only thing remaining in Wallachia that held meaning to its people. The town had now rotten fruit stands littered across the broken stone tiles of the capital. The people lived in the wooden lodges that had aged as badly as the fruit had. The wood was unbelievably old, yet held yielding to the elements. Andreas was the king of a kingdom without food, protection, or joy. One day, while sitting atop his throne, the king was approached by his people seeking help. The king despaired in the manner in which his subjects would treat one another, even though they were very poor. The king then made a decision to share his own wealth with everyone else so that everyone could treat each other with dignity again. Immediately, the king stepped out of his royal chambers and addressed his kingdom, saying,
I will share my wealth with all of you because of your cries and for our grim future. The future which we tread towards is a grim one indeed. So let mine riches be the way towards a brighter tomorrow.
Although the king taught himself as a saint for sharing his kingly wealth, others only saw as hubris and pity. The king believed his job to be finished. Finally, returned to his royal chambers once again, his wealth evenly distributed. Soon after, the king was met again with cries of disapproval from his people. Cries that the country had no food and that they were all dying of hunger. Shocked, the king emerged from his chambers once again, stating,
I have heard your cries for food, and they shall be met by month's end.
The king then proceeded to ask the neighboring countries of Xylem, Alcazar, Bavaria, and Avalon to send as much food as possible in return for more of the king's wealth. Wallachia's relationship with the other countries had been deteriorating ever since Andreas became king, but the desperation overcame him and he proceeded to ask his neighboring countries for help. These nations were separated by lush jungles filled with all different manner of creature that lie within weight within the jungle itself. As recompense for sustenance, wagons carrying more of the king's riches were sent out upon the land, and as sure as the sun was to set by month's end, the people were given their food on the backs of hundreds of wagons sent by other nations. Thinking his task to finally be achieved, the king retired to his chambers once again to seek sleep's gentle embrace. Soon yet again, the king was disturbed while he was taking full enjoyment of the kingdom's blissful peace. Disappointed at yet another plea from his people, the king stormed out of his castle to address his subjects, stating,
What doth my people need? Have I not given enough of my wealth to you so that you may be satisfied?
To this cry, subjects responded by stating that the kingdom needed power and strength. From the soon amassing crowd, a bevy of voices said,
How are we to protect ourselves if we come under harm from another nation? We already sent them money, would prevent them from attacking us and taking all of our riches.
There are bandits from places beyond ours that are running rampant now that everyone has some form of wealth.
I will find the power which thine seeks, but after doing so, I shall hear of no more troubles, for once attained, we shall want for nothing and fear no one.
The king began devising a strategy to attain more power for his country. Then the incoming threat of other countries attacking him was imminent. The wealth that King Andreas spread may have spared his people from starvation, but it did not spare Wallachia's political standing. The abundance of wealth within Wallachia was slowly becoming a realization to the other countries. Realizing this, Andreas met with his military and political advisors to devise a proper course of action.
Kneel before your king, the mighty King Andreas.
Andreas spoke.
You may rise. What will get our nation on the right track to power?
Well, we don't have much of a standing army currently, since our citizens haven't been fully capable of military training due to their lack of food. I reckon it should take about a year's time to have an inexperienced army to potentially repel other nations with.
Our country can be attacked within months. We may not have a year to spare. For now, begin recruitment efforts toward our army. Is there any hope of establishing a firm relationship with any other nation? The elves in Avalon, maybe?
Most likely we can set up contact with the elves, but not likely with other nations since you gave up a significant amount of your riches from the treasury to them. They seem to either pity us or look down upon us. Unfortunately, it seems the other nations of Alcazar, Zalem, and Bavaria haven't and won't reply to a single communications raven we've been sending.
If only we were given a fair shake. This land is without life or magic, and is a curse to this kingdom. Why weren't we given the opportunities the others were?
After meeting with his advisors, Andreas began the long trek back to his chambers for time to ponder the situation of the kingdom.
Are we so unfit to be on equal footing with everyone else?
With this in mind, Andreas, wide-eyed within his chambers, raced to the castle crypt that held the texts of old Wallachia. The crypt had never been a place that the king, or anyone for that matter, frequented, for it was damp and dark with very little light. The library that was kept within the crypt was arguably as old as the capital of Aragon itself, with different books that had been collected from the countries of Avalon, Xylem, Alcazar, and Bavaria in the days of old. Andreas searched through the dredges for the old Aragon crypt till he found a specific ancient text that read,
Arcane.
in Elvish. The book was from Avalon. Upon reading, Andreas would roughly translate the Elvish and would come to know what much of the world knew except for Wallachia, that magic can only come from one original source, called the primordial excess. This magic can be spread and used if one or many people all band themselves with a unifying mark or crest. This process would become known as the primordial transference. This primordial well sits at the very center of Wysteria, constantly feeding magic to the land and its inhabitants. Stunned by this realization, Andreas says,
What could have caused our land specifically to be excluded from the gift of magic?
Still seeking more answers, Andreas translated and read what was left of the old Elvish text through the night and into the coming morning. Upon the morning after his expedition into the Wallachian crypt, the king stomped up the creaky wooden stairs of the crypt twice as fast as he'd went down. Even though his body demanded to rest, his mind was preoccupied with magic. Having learned as much as possible from the Book of Arcane, the king called for a gathering of all the subjects within Wallachia, with a promise of fulfilling their request for power. As days passed, mass amounts of people began to gather at Aragon. The city had not seen much excitement until days of old, when dreams were new and faces were fresh. Lines of people lined the newly decorated courtyard as voices of anticipation began to pour in from the crowd. It almost looked as if a royal procession were to take place within the very kingdom that lacked life itself. Once everyone had gathered, the trumpets and fanfare began as King Andreas began his address.
I know you all have been yearning for power and protection. Within the ancient texts of Wallachia, your answers have been found. We lack the fundamental means to stand shoulder to shoulder with the nations of Xylem, Alcazar, Bavaria, and Avalon. Fortunately, those means can be found through the magic, which we all wield with the Aragon crest.
Andreas brought out a crimson shield that was embroidered with twin dragons that traveled up the edge of the shield and met at the very top of it. Engraved in its center was a crown of thorns placed atop a heart. Raising the shield triumphantly, the king exclaimed,
Let all within our kingdom step up and brandish this crest on thine skin, in order to announce ourselves to the world as equals!
With his address finished, Andreas returned to his throne room to embark on a journey to return magic to his country. Within the coming days, everyone was branded with the Aragon crest in the hopes of receiving magic from the very king himself. On the morrow, the king gathered his political and military advisors once more, but with a clear purpose in mind. Aragon sat upon his throne and said to his military advisor,
Gather the finest adventurer this land has to offer, so that he may protect and accompany me on my journey within a week or two's time. Do so with haste, for the kingdom depends on it. Have we made contact with any nations yet?
We have, my king. Avalon seeks to send a scholar to accompany you on your journey, as well as to continue to study the negligence of magic within Wallachia.
Andreas pondered about the offer, but due to the fact that his own experience with magic was limited, he thought it fit to add someone who was knowledgeable of such things to the company. Andreas replied,
Send Avalon a raven accepting the offer, and a message they should arrive 1 or 2 weeks from today.
Once everyone was gathered before the king, who was fitted with family jewels that glistened in the light of the gleaming sun, formal introductions were officially made. The female elf stepped up first, She had a bright disposition that seemed to radiate the room. Her hair was a hazel and braided as beautifully as the hand-woven tapestries that laid upon the castle walls. She wore a scholar's robe and carried herself accordingly. She approached the king and said,
Greetings, King Andres. My name is Albania, of the Silver Elves. I've come bearing news, but before that, on behalf of the people of Avalon, it would be my esteemed pleasure to take part in this journey with you.
Wallachia would be welcome to have such a scholar as yourself. With pleasantries out of the way, what are you eager to tell me?
Yes, in essence, the country of Salem and Bavaria might launch an assault upon your country by month's end.
I'm not surprised given the way they view us. We have no magic and now wealth is beginning to flow within my kingdom. So then, what of our relationship with Avalon? Why would they send one of their scholars merely to study our land?
Please understand the intentions of my nation are righteous. The physical land of Wallachia is an oddity in Wysteria. One of Avalon would like to know more of, since it holds no magic in comparison to the rest of the world.
With that, Albino was guided out of the throne room and was to prepare for the oncoming journey. Next, a warrior that towered over most of the royal court, including Andreas himself, stepped forward.
What is thy name, mighty adventurer?
My name is Lycan. I will be a sword if need be, well as shield. I will make sure our journey is as safe as possible.
Lycan stood a hooded figure, adorned with silver plating and swords across his back. This stature was overshadowed by the king's own curiosity with Lycan. Andreas asks,
How long will the trip to the center of Wysteria take from here?
About 4 weeks' time, we get them 4 months ahead.
Satisfied with his answer, Andreas dismissed Lycan to prepare for the oncoming journey. No one would fully know what the fall of the Trinity would bring until the collapse. King Andreas sat in his chambers and thought about the oncoming journey. The uncertainty of the journey itself was a constant thought that was lodged in the back of Andreas's mind. Relenting to the thought, Andreas said to himself,
The problems that can occur on this adventurous crusade are vast. I fear for my people. I fear other nations will resent us for what we have gained and attempt to take it from us. I fear my people's eager lust for strength, though having an abundance of strength is greater than not having strength in any manner.
Albania was given the run of specific areas of the castle to enhance their knowledge of lack of magic in Wallachia. Taking advantage of this, Albania eagerly took up vigorous books regarding Wallachia's history as well as the land from the Aragon library. Although the books varied, Albania was able to quickly learn the troubled history of not only Aragon but Wallachia. Lycan, seeking to be away from the activeness and prestige of the castle, sought to spend his night resting upon a tree by a river outlooking onto the forest and thought to himself,
The simple thing in life tends to be easy, but they're the easiest way I partake in it. This journey doesn't bode well. I usually trust my gut when it comes to jobs, but when the king himself asked, there was a little I could do to refuse such a figure.
Your praise is too great.
The curiosity that the king held the moment he met with Lycan had gotten the better of him, and he ventured from his castle to speak with the adventurer.
The pleasures of this castle tend to be limited at best, but one can never misunderstand the pleasures of the river and forest. I wanted to hear your thoughts on the journey we are partaking in. I truly know not whether it is righteous.
May I have permission to speak freely, Your Grace?
You may speak as freely as the river runs.
Lycan's tone softened from the gruff and rugged adventurer to a man in need of clarity.
Your efforts towards the kingdom, haven't been the best. The wealth that you granted helped, but also hurt. You're the only person in this continent to covet such wealth, but you neglected the gaze of the other countries. And now you want to partake in this journey, of which rare few have made it back alive?
I understand your concerns, but I'd want my people to no longer need my wealth, nor myself for that matter to feel safe. I've seen the way our neighboring countries are run, and I seek to be like them, equal in every way. The weight of the crown feels mighty, but not as mighty as right now.
Lycan, considering the king's words, looks longingly at the moon's gentle beams, finding conviction. He stands from the tree and says,
Well, if that's what you're truly after, I have no other choice but to oblige. We shall get to the center of Wysteria without fail.
I shall be depending on you, my noble adventure.
With their conversation finished, nothing was left but to prepare for the oncoming journey that held the kingdom's future at its center. Find out what happens next time on Adventure of Wysteria.